Hey everyone, it's Jonathan and welcome back to Every Version Ever. Today we're covering the 1996 version of Pinocchio starring Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and for most of my life, I thought this was a Disney movie. I've always thought of this film as one of Disney's first live-action remakes, but apparently I was wrong. I'm not sure where I got this idea. In my research for this episode, I really tried to find anything that might explain why I thought this was made by Disney. I could have sworn I saw it as part of The Wonderful World of Disney, which was a TV film series I used to watch Sunday nights as a kid in the 90s, but I can't find anything to corroborate that. I do remember borrowing it from the library too, so I think I've just somehow merged some things in my memory, and for over 20 years I've just falsely assumed it was a Disney movie. However, I did find several old articles from the time it was released that also described it as a remake of the Disney film, which, now having rewatched it, despite some similarities I would say it mostly isn't. But either way, I think I'm not the only person to have been confused by this thing. However, despite the fact that this was definitely not made by Disney, it does have a few connections, and at some point early in the process this potentially could have been a Disney film. From what I've read, Disney was first approached to helm this film sometime in the 80s, I think with the intention that it would serve as a live-action remake of the 1941 film. However, Disney ultimately ended up passing on the idea. Obviously, that wasn't the end of things though, because it was eventually picked up by a whole host of production companies, becoming a massive intercontinental production with not just American studios, but also British, French, Czech, and German studios all coming together with Jim Henson Creature Shop to make this thing happen. I'm not sure what they all saw in this thing to make it become such a massive production, because the film ultimately ended up becoming kind of a dud and fading into obscurity. Except with me, aside from the Disney version, this was my Pinocchio growing up. Like I said, I remember borrowing it from the library a bunch of times, and even if it wasn't part of the Wonderful World of Disney, I could have sworn I taped it off the TV at some point because I'm sure I had it on VHS. Either way, whether I owned it or not, I watched it a lot as a kid, and when I decided to do a series on Pinocchio, I knew this one would have to be one of the ones I covered. Joining me for this episode are my friends Katie Fabrick and Nicki from Trivial Theater. I had no specific co-host in mind for this episode when I first decided to cover it. However, as I researched it, I found out there was actually a direct-to-video sequel starring almost no one from the original film, and that idea was just begging for a Nicki and Katie collab, so we had to do both. So this week we'll be talking about the 1996 original that I grew up with, and next week we'll be talking about the 1999 direct-to-video sequel that I had no idea even existed until doing this podcast.
It's funny. I was telling some friends, oh yeah, I do a podcast sometimes. And they're like, what do they do? And I'm like, well, right now, all I've been doing is watching bad Pinocchio movies.
And one good one.
Yeah.
And one good one, yes.
Welcome to the world of interesting cinema.
And I wouldn't necessarily call this first one bad, but it is kind of mediocre. But also, I watched this when I was a kid, so maybe I have a bit of a soft spot for it. Because I kept having moments throughout watching it where I was, like, having flashbacks. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember this.
See, I also watched this movie as a kid, and it absolutely terrified me.
Really? So what exactly about it? Because this is actually my first viewing of this.
Pinocchio's face
I
is
could see it.
the most terrifying thing. I hated it so much as a kid. And yet I watched this movie like multiple times. I hated everything about like the faces of like anything that wasn't a human.
Does that include Pepe?
Oh yeah, Pepe is the greatest. That moment when he like just makes those pop culture references, like,
I loved it how they were in the midst of like a traumatic situation. And he's like doing a dance or like, tipping a straw hat or whatever. It's like, I don't think you're taking this very seriously, Mr. Pepe.
With Pepe, was he supposed to be dead?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because
Well, they were not clear, but in the book, he is dead.
wow.
In the book, on their first meeting, Pinocchio murders him with a hammer. In this one, I think he just stomps on him, and then he shows up later, and he's kind of glowy, but they never address it.
He does actually say that you took me out. He doesn't say you took me out, but he says something to the extent of, well, being that you kind of did something to me. I don't remember the exact verbiage, but he does offhandedly mention it.
Okay.
I think he is dead because, like, I think when you get that first, like, half a second of him flying out of the bush
Yes.
and right into the screen, and you're like, oh gosh, it's horrible. um, I think he was blue, if I remember correctly, and then he's green for the rest of the movie, so I think that's like his ghosty form or something.
Yeah, and he does have kind of a, like you mentioned, he's kind of glowy. And I think they keep that glow throughout pretty consistent. But it's
Yeah.
weird because sometimes it doesn't stay like it gets kind of like the opacity gets funky on it. And it's almost like they were dissolving between different, I don't know, different takes or something of him. It was odd.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't think it was very clear, but knowing that he's dead in the book made me think that he probably was dead here, but they didn't make it clear to me anyway.
Right.
Mm.
I would agree.
And I don't think I ever thought that when I was a kid.
Well, and if the first thing you saw, and I don't know if was the first, like, what was your first exposure to Pinocchio? Was it the Disney one?
Yes, we had the Disney one on VHS. That was one of two Disney movies we had when I was a kid. We had that and Aladdin. Those are the only ones we owned. The rest we either just never saw or borrowed from the library.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, I mean, that being your kind of foundational or your foundational Pinocchio knowledge, that makes sense that, like, why would they kill off such an essential character?
Yeah, there's a lot that I'm realizing that the other versions just take straight from the Disney version. The book, having now actually read the book, this is the first podcast we're doing post reading the book. Everything I've done before this, I had not read the book since I was a kid, and even then it was read to me and I don't remember much of it. So this will be the first podcast where, having read the book, it will inform how I'm judging different scenes based on how book accurate they are. And I'm noticing that other Pinocchios that I've watched, either for the podcast or not, or that will be upcoming in the future, they have stuff in it that is closer to Disney than it was to the book, which kind of makes sense because Disney sort of
Wrote the book?
they kind of made the book into something that makes a little more sense because the book is all over the place. The book is just basically a ton of little short stories. Like, there is a narrative through line, but it's mostly just Pinocchio running away and being bad and then repenting and then getting tricked into being bad again. And then it's tons of misadventures of him just being terrible and learning in horrible ways that he was terrible.
Really?
Yeah, we'll get to it later when we get to the donkey scene, but the book is dark.
You know, I was talking to a friend of mine that works with kids that have been, like, had abuse in their lives, and I was offhandedly mentioning that when we did the other Pinocchio movies, and she was saying, yeah, I can't. I've tried to read the book to my kids, and I can't, just because it's so, like, the messages of abuse in it are out there, and I guess I didn't. You kind of see it, but I'm not sure if she's, like, seeing it from the perspective of a therapist or if she's seeing it from the perspective of a mom, or how exactly. So
I don't know that I would say that. Well, I guess it depends on.
I mean, abuse can be many things. So,
Like, it's not parental or familial abuse in any way, but he's abused by strangers, that's for sure, over and over and over, as are most of the kids. Any child who was part of the pack that got turned into donkeys. I was going to ask Katie,
Mhm.
so you saw this when you were a kid. Do you remember how you first saw it?
I think it was one of the times where I went to the library because we were probably a 10-minute walk from a library, and I would jog down there. We would just get like a ton of books, and then like every like month we'd go back and stuff like that. And I was allowed to pick out movies sometimes, and I don't think I picked that movie, but someone's like, Pinocchio, that'll be fun. And I was like, I'm sure it will be because I'm a stupid child and didn't see the signs of how. I was like, surely he doesn't look like that in the movie, or he'll look better when he is actually moving, right? No, no, he looked worse. He's horrible.
I will say, the animatronic puppet that they used for Pinocchio in this was actually done by the Jim Henson Creature Shop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it took them between 9 months and a year to figure out.
Yeah, I didn't think he looked too bad, but I get stuff like this is not what scared me as a kid, so this was fine to me. It didn't faze me. I can see how it probably would scare some kids, though.
Oh, I could see how it could be massively creepy. Just you look at the way he moves and being it was stop motion.
Yeah, there was a lot of stop motion in there. I noticed that.
That would do me in at that age. I mean,
There seems to be a trend of using stop motion for Pinocchios, even in movies that aren't like this is not a stop motion film, but they use it, I think, to pretty good effect in this film. But yeah, some kids are triggered by stop motion.
I'd say as long as you don't, and regarded, obviously, if you're going to do a wide shot, you're going to see him walking, but it's that uncanny valley of him walking. I think that is probably the thing that, at least from an outside perspective, would be the thing that would scare me personally. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember how I first saw this movie. I have two options. One is the same option as Katie, because I'm fairly certain I do remember this as a tape at the library, but I could also have sworn that this was something that played on The Wonderful World of Disney, because for years I have thought of this as one of Disney's first live action remakes, but apparently it is not. Because I thought that I saw it on like a Sunday night, because Disney always did like the Wonderful World of
Mhm.
Disney movies on Sunday nights, and I would always watch those. I taped a bunch of them. That's how I watched a lot of movies around that time. And of course, having it on tape, rewatched and rewatched. So I know I've rewatched this a few times. So I just assumed that that's where it was from, but it could have been one that I borrowed from the library more than once, or that my brothers borrowed from the library because I have four brothers, so we would sometimes borrow the same movies and just watch them. So I know I watched this several times as a kid, but whether it was something on TV or something from the library, I don't know. I know that sometimes there could be movies that aren't necessarily Disney on the Wonderful World of Disney. So maybe that's where maybe they like bought the rights for the night or something. I don't know. It'd be interesting if somebody out there knows if this was part of the Wonderful World of Disney. But other than that, I'm not exactly sure how I saw it, but I just know that when I was a kid, I watched it several times. Well, I guess we could talk about the cast. There's a couple people on here that I recognize. I recognize a couple names, but I don't know how much I would have seen them in other things. At the time, I knew who Jonathan Taylor Thomas was because I loved him because he had the same first name as me. I was like, it's so cool that there's a Jonathan on TV. So I was excited to see him in this because I just liked that he had my name.
that's a good name to have too.
And then I haven't seen much of Rob Schneider, but he's very recognizable. He played the fox. The fox and the cat are different in this version. The fox and the cat in most versions and in the book are a fox and a cat. In this version, they are people, but their names reference what they are. The fox is Volpe, which is also the name that they gave him in the Guillermo del Toro version. And I think that means fox in Italian. And in the Italian version, no animal was named anything other than the name of the animal that they were. So that makes sense for him. The cat, I don't know what the cat would have been because the cat in this version is female and she is called Feline. It's basically spelled feline, but there's a T at the end.
Interesting.
And they've kind of reversed their roles because in the book and most versions, the fox is the one in charge. The fox is the one that's smart, and the cat is kind of his dopey sidekick. But in this version, the cat is the one who's in charge. The cat is the one who's smart, and the fox is the idiot. So it's kind of an interesting twist on those two characters. And they're really the only ones that I can think of that are basically the talking animals. Like, no versions that I've seen, the talking animals kind of just don't get included other than the fox and the cat. And they're the ones that people know. But in the book, there are a lot of talking animals. Like, a lot. Like, even the judge, like, it's not the same courtroom scene here, but the judge is a gorilla in the book.
Oh my God, really?
Yes.
They should have just kept that, but everyone treated it like it was completely normal.
They
Like
should have. They should have.
they're just like, oh, it's a gorilla.
I'm hoping that there are other versions out there that do that. I don't know if I will be able to find. I think I only have one left to watch for this series this time around. That is an actual adaptation of Pinocchio. That is probably terrible. So we'll see if any of the animals show up. But other than that, I'm hoping that I find one in the future that is kind of faithful to the book, because it would be interesting to see some of the bizarre things from the book, because the book is very bizarre. The other main character is Martin Landau as Geppetto, and I feel like I've seen him in other things. He has a very familiar name, but I can't say off the top of my head where I would know him from.
I mean, he did, and I doubt you'd know it. There's a movie called, so there was a filmmaker back in the 50s and 60s named Ed Wood, and he did like absolutely atrocious movies, like Plan 9 from Outer Space. And
I've heard
Martin,
of that.
yeah, Martin Landau played Bela Lugosi in. It was a biopic done by Tim Burton, but it wasn't really biopic per se. So it was as close to a biopic as you're going to get from Tim Burton.
Huh.
But yeah, he's been in quite a few things. He's a fairly well-seasoned actor.
Yeah, and I thought he was a good Geppetto.
He was enjoyable.
And the other main character that you have from the book is the cricket in this version named Pepe. The cricket is just the cricket in the book. So every version seems to give him a different name. In this one, it's Pepe, and that's David Doyle. And I recognize the voice, but I forgot to look him up, so I don't know what I know him from.
Give me a second here. I will answer that question for you. Oh, here we go. Okay, so he was the voice, or he was John Bosley in Charlie's Angels. He played Grandpa Lou in Rugrats.
That's why I recognize the voice. Yes. Okay, now I know why his voice was so recognizable. He was the grandpa in Rugrats.
He did all kinds of stuff back in the all kinds of voice work back in the 90s. He was let's see here. Goof Troop, Darkwing Duck, Tailspin, Bonkers, Wild West, COW Boys of Moo Mesa, Sonic, Beethoven, Bobby's World, Quack Pack. Yeah, he did kind of everything.
Yeah, you're naming a lot of stuff that I have seen, so that's another reason. But when you said the grandpa in Rugrats, instantly recognizable, yes. I probably have seen him in other things, but the grandpa in Rugrats, I know that's why his voice was familiar. The other big character here is Laurenzini, he's sort of an original character, but also sort of an amalgamation of characters from the story. At first, he's basically the character of Mangiafuoco, and if you've seen the Disney Pinocchio, that's Stromboli, basically. Although Mangiafuoco literally translates from Italian to English as, I think, fire eater. So they've paid homage to that by having him eat chili peppers and sort of breathing fire. Which is an interesting way to take that character. But he's played by Udo Kier, and I recognize his face, but I don't know if I would have known him from anything else.
1 second. It's Udo?
Udo Kier.
He's played in a lot of stuff. Let's see here. So he is known for, let's see, his most well-known stuff aren't things that I'm familiar with. I know him from things. Like, he plays a really good bad guy. Like, He just has that face.
He looks like characters that I would have seen in old Disney movies, like 60s and 70s, like the really campy comedy action movies, because I watched a lot of those as a kid too.
Oh, absolutely. So he was in one of the Beethoven movies. He was in Puppet Master, one of the Puppet Masters, not the main one. He was a Professor Pericles in Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, Lords of Salem, Melancholia. He was in Chuck, Far Cry, Grindhouse, which was Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez.
Mostly a lot of stuff I've heard of but never seen.
Yeah, a lot of horror or horror-based things. A lot of voice work too. Johnny Mnemonic. Ace. Oh, he was in Ace Ventura. Oh, he was in Suspiria. But yeah, he's got stuff going back to 1966, so he's been around.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's your...
Well, the only other actor that I really know that I know and wanted to make sure to mention is somebody who's not a main character. We have Dawn French as one of the bakers. I love
Her
Dawn
hat is
French.
great.
I watched her off and on. Like half of what we watched as kids was PBS, and every Saturday was Britcom night, and she was the vicar of Dibley. So, like, that's one of those shows that, looking back, it's like that is not appropriate for children, but we didn't get anything that they were saying. I just like her. She's hilarious.
That's a great thing about being a kid.
I remember we went to visit my grandparents one time and we were watching Are You Being Served, which
I
is
love that one.
also extremely not for children. And we were watching it and laughing, and my grandpa came in. He was like, "You let them watch that? That should be rated R." And I was thinking to myself, but why? And then I grew up and realized, oh, they weren't talking about what I thought they were talking about. I still love all those old shows, even the ones that are kind of inappropriate. They're still hilarious, and I love the actors. They're so good.
Well, they were inappropriate without being inappropriate. Like they
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
really good at wordplay.
Yes. That's the whole thing with Are You Being Served? Like, yes, they probably could have been rated R if they were actually talking about what it sounded like they were talking about, but they weren't, so they got away with it. And when you're a kid, you don't have any idea of what they're talking about, so it's
Yeah.
fine. But yeah, that's the main cast that I guess is notable. I should say BB Newirth as Felinae, another person where I recognize the name but don't know what she would have been in. But she was the last, like, there I suppose there could be other people that are notable that I just don't know. Oh wait, forgot about one who is somebody who's not in the book, Leona, played by Genevieve Buchholz, who is an actress that I know goes way back, but I don't recognize her. But her character is somebody who is made up for this movie. She is not in the book at all.
According to Wikipedia, she takes the place of the blue fairy, kind of. Like it's not a one-to-one replacement.
A little bit.
Yeah.
If you really want to stretch the definition of what the Blue Fairy was in the book, because in certain passages she was like a sister, and in other passages she was like a mother to Pinocchio. So, kind of. Kind of. But yeah, there was no Blue Fairy in this one, which is interesting, which in some ways makes sense if you're going with the book, because in the book, the Blue Fairy did not bring Pinocchio to life. Pinocchio was just a sentient tree. I don't really know what exactly was going on with Pinocchio, because you have another wood carver, or wood cutter, I guess, who is not Geppetto, collecting this log that starts abusing him. Like, it drops on his foot, it hits his leg. Like, I don't know. If it were me, I would think this log is possessed, but he eventually ends up giving it to Geppetto. Like, the book is so weird. Like, Geppetto and this guy are like sort of friends, but also they fight. Like, they have like a full-on brawl, and they come out of it friends. I don't know. The book is weird. But yeah, Pinocchio, the log is just alive. And it's sort of that in this movie. You have Geppetto carving a heart into the tree, like expressing his love for Leona. And you don't get any backstory yet. You just know that he loves whoever this Leona is. And then when he leaves, a bolt of lightning hits the tree, and then the heart that he carved is like glowy and magical. And then years later, he finds the remains of this tree and turns it into Pinocchio. And Pinocchio is alive because.
I'm alive. I'm a real boy. I'm alive.
Well, and it's crazy. He doesn't really see the heart until he like gets in close. It's like, how do you miss? I don't know. Maybe it's me.
Yeah.
I feel like, how do you miss that?
I think like the idea was that it rebarked
True.
That's kind of what I was thinking because I thought he should have seen it, but I think it was sort of hidden by the bark because it would have healed over the years. Because I think he was supposed to be pretty young when he carved the heart.
I think they said it was 20 years.
Oh, okay. So not super young, I guess, because I wasn't sure. I guess the age thing. I wasn't sure how old he was supposed to be. Not that it matters, because I looking at him and Leona together, I was like, they don't look the same age.
That happens a lot.
I know a lot
know?
of movies do that, so and it doesn't matter because most people aren't playing the same age that they are anyways. But there's a 14-year age difference between the actors, so I don't know what age they were supposed to be in the movie.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure either. All I know is what if we find out later, and it's not a point of importance one way or the other really, but Leona married Geppetto's brother.
Yeah, and I want to know what happened to the brother. Is he alive or is he dead? I'm
He got
assuming
an axe
dead.
to the face.
He tripped
No
up.
one knows what. Yeah, exactly. A strange
No.
piece of wood attacked him.
You don't understand, Gorilla Judge. He tripped. Shouldn't leave your axes lying around, but he tripped.
He fell down a canyon onto an axe.
Just one of the hazards of being a woodcutter.
Exactly. Darndest thing, I tell you.
Yeah, you have Geppetto carving Pinocchio, and you get like little twitches as he's being put together. And then Geppetto takes a bath fully clothed.
Yeah.
Well, it's a PG movie, I'm sure.
I know that that's the reason, but also, like, there are other ways you could have shot that or other things he could have done. Like, you don't want him to be like a naked person in the movie, but like, why have him take a bath fully clothed? That just is so bizarre.
Look, Geppetto's heart was absolutely shattered by Leona, and he was very self-conscious after that. He just, plus it was a room full of puppets. Would you want a room full of puppets staring at you while you take a bath?
Get a curtain.
That is true. It would also work.
I feel like if they really wanted to make him get in the bath, like he should have like just been drawing the bath and not actually have climbed in.
Yeah. and even just shorts. Like that still doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it still would make more sense than the whole like he had a shirt on. Why are you with a shirt?
Well, he's doing laundry. He's trying to multitask laundry and bath.
I suppose. Maybe that's how they did it in the olden days.
I have no idea. All I can think is you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe maybe you don't throw the Geppetto out with the bathwater either. There was actually and it's just caught me because I don't know why it caught me, but at the very beginning, before he starts carving Pinocchio, he's like saying goodnight to all of his puppets, and he says that they have to go to bed because bad little boys go to bed without being sandpapered.
Yeah, it's like they're already finished, Geppetto. Don't sandpaper them now.
That's right, and that doesn't seem like it'd be very fun.
All the paint would I guess that maybe what he does all the time, as we learned that he never sells any puppets anyways, so
yeah.
He just repaints
he
them.
does sell some because like that's the whole point. Like maybe it was just the two, I don't know. He sold at least two to Laurenzini.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that maybe Laurenzini was like a regular customer. I don't know.
Yeah, because like he said, I'm not going to buy those same puppets you tried to sell me 2 years ago. So he hasn't been back for 2 years, I assume.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. You kind of get the idea that Geppetto is a little eccentric, so maybe all of these things are just his eccentricities. He just likes bathing in his clothes and making puppets he never sells, sandpapering the puppets that are misbehaving.
He has like stare downs with the one. He's like, you look here, and like he's gotten into stare downs with this one puppet giving him the stink eye, and he like ends up sanding down half of the puppet's face because he keeps giving him nasty looks.
Oh gosh.
Constant road rash.
Well, while he's fully clothed bathing, Pinocchio comes to life, and this is the first, I remember that memory unlocked moment when he goes, "Excuse me, coming through." I don't know why. That's just one of the ones that was stuck in my brain. And I love Geppetto's reaction to seeing him. He says, "It's happened. I finally lost my mind." Like he's been expecting this for a while.
Well, I mean, he was bathing fully clothed, so maybe he saw the signs.
One too many conversations with people with sawdust in their heads.
Yeah.
You have another scene here where Pinocchio chases a pigeon outside and up onto the roofs of the village. And this was another random memory flashback where he goes, "Coo, coo," and tries to fly. It's like, oh, I remember that distinctly. I don't know why, but that one stuck in my head.
I remembered Luigi, so the weird singing guy.
He had a good voice.
Yeah.
Even though it was told to eat socks many, many times.
Yeah. He just wants to be Italian, okay? He just wants to sing.
So you have Geppetto chasing Pinocchio around the village, and they run into Leona, who I'm not sure how Leona feels about Geppetto. Like, yes, they like each other, but I think she also thinks he's a mess.
You don't have to look far to see that.
But also, like, at least in this first scene, it's like nobody seems fazed by the fact that Pinocchio can move and speak on his own. Like later on, it's sort of a novelty, but like I couldn't figure out if they thought that he was alive or if he was a puppet. It seemed like she didn't think it was strange that he had a living puppet. It was just it seemed random. Like she treated him like normal and then gave him some clothes.
Oh, Geppetto. You a living puppet this time? Oh, you have a hat.
Exactly. I always thought, because I saw the box art for the movie many times. I assumed that what was his hair was actually a hat, and then it's like, oh, he's got a hat and hair. Cool. But yeah, you're right. There was a couple people in the background you kind of see pointing and kind of like whispering and such. But by and large, yeah, it's just normal.
Yeah, because her friend, when they're leaving, her friend says that he seems a little stiff. And Leona says, just like his father. So it's like, do they think he's alive or what? Or do they think he's real? I didn't know what they thought.
Well, and even with things that we have yet to talk about coming up in the next couple scenes, there's no way that all of the people that run across him, all the situations he gets into, people should see him as anything other than a living puppet, but they seem like they see him as a real boy.
Yeah. It didn't seem like there was much consistency of what people were supposed to think about him.
Yeah.
You do have one guy who stops him and asks how he made him, and Geppetto says he doesn't know, but he's afraid that he's going to get burnt at the stake. And the guy says, no, they stopped burning people. They might hang you, though.
That was one of the lines I remembered as a kid. I was just like, oh, yeah.
Pinocchio eventually runs off again, and he meets another boy and asks if he's a real boy, and the kid says, yes, are you? And he says, yes. And at this point, his nose doesn't grow, and I was wondering, like, I don't feel like in the book that there's a lot of consistency with the nose growing thing, because apparently the noses growing with lies came from Pinocchio. Like, that wasn't a thing before Pinocchio was written. But it wasn't consistent in the book either. Like sometimes his nose would grow when he lied when it needed to for the plot to happen, but it didn't always grow, and sometimes it grew when he didn't lie for other reasons. So it wasn't fully consistent, and I was wondering if maybe that's what they were going for here, because like he just says yes and he's not a real boy at this point. So I don't know if they were going for that or if he's saying yes because he's so naive he doesn't know what a real boy even means. So I don't know.
At that point, I don't think he did. Like he was still like repeating people and kind of getting all that stuff figured out. That's kind of what my interpretation of it was.
Yeah, he was still like mimicking people at this point, so I don't think he fully even knew how to talk, even though he was sort of saying complete sentences.
Right. It kind of reminded me, and there's no correlation between these two, but it's where my head went. Have either of you seen or read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yes.
I've
Okay.
seen a couple. I've seen the old version. Wait, have I seen the old version? I think I borrowed it from the library years ago.
Okay, so you know where the whale and the thing of petunias is falling out of the sky or manifested out of the sky and starts to fall?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the whale is like, oh God, oh, I exist. What do I want to call myself? I better start naming things. Okay, I'm gonna call myself something big. Whale. I'll call myself a whale. And oh, that thing coming at me, it's big and grand. It needs a big name. Ground. Okay, I'm going towards the ground. I wonder if it'll be friends with me. That whole bit, like him trying to come to terms with his own reality, kind of. That was this.
Yeah.
Only, he didn't slam into the ground and become, a series of weird arches surrounded by whale blubber. Sorry. That was a really random tangent.
This is also where you meet the fox and the cat, Volpe and Feline. And I thought it was funny. I don't know if it on purpose, but Feline, even though it's feline with a T, it's pronounced in such a way that it sounds like felony. Which I thought was funny, and I don't know if it was on purpose or not. So they're like intrigued by Pinocchio, and they eventually go off to tell Laurenzini about him because they think that they will be enriched by Laurenzini. Like they're kind of dumb, even though she's a lot smarter than the fox. Feline is a lot smarter than Volpe. They both keep thinking that Lorenzini is going to be their friend, and he's not. Lorenzini immediately goes to try and buy Pinocchio from Geppetto, but he refuses to sell. And while Lorenzini is trying to haggle with him, Pinocchio jumps out the window and runs off again. Which a lot of this is not from the book, but it is very true to the book that Pinocchio just keeps running away. That happens all the time in the book. I thought it was interesting in this version, Pinocchio goes to school of his own accord, and I don't think I've seen that in any version. Like Pinocchio never wants to go to school, and even if he does, kind of like in the Disney version, he never gets there. But in this version, he actually gets to school and sits in class for a while until he gets into a fight with Lampwick and then lies about it, and then his nose grows. And this whole thing, I remembered a lot of this too from when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
And you have a quote directly from the book, even though it's not in this, like the scene does not exist in the book. But the teacher quotes the book and says, there are two kinds of lies, lies that have short legs and lies that have a long nose, which I don't know what that means, but it's from the book.
It's from the book, so it must be true.
Yep.
Maybe it's a saying in Italy, I don't know, but it's from the book. So I thought it was interesting that they kept that for the movie. And Pinocchio ends up blasting sawdust all over the teacher by sneezing. And he gets kicked out of class. And I think this is also kind of close to what happens in the book. His nose goes back down to the normal size as he confesses to each lie that he's told. And I'm pretty sure that something similar happened in the book. And then this is where you have another scene that was very firmly locked in my mind. This is the most random scene, but when he walks by the bakery and sees a kid stuffing his face with eclairs or something, like that image of this kid stuffing his face with eclairs, like, I remember that kid. So then Pinocchio decides to just start stuffing his face as well. And this is one of those things where it's never consistent between any of the versions whether or not Pinocchio can or needs to eat. Like in the book, he's basically alive. Like in the book, he eats, he breathes, he needs everything that a human needs. Like the only thing that separates him from being a human is that his flesh is wood.
Oh, interesting.
He's basically just a magical wooden human in the book. So this is one of those things where if you've never read the book, it'll seem weird that he's like actively eating, and you might wonder how.
but like he eats stuff in the book, so it's from the book that he can eat, even though this scene is not in the book. He eats, so
Yeah, I was totally confused because and obviously you can't hold. There's certain bits of logic that you can't hold
Yes.
with movies like this.
Yeah.
You know, it's got its own set of physics, but I was just sitting there like, where does it all go? Like that's a lot of pastry. There's a lot of very sweet French pastry stuff to shove in one's face and to not have a massive tummy ache later.
Yeah. Dawn French is the main character of the bakery. I love her. She's hilarious. She sees Pinocchio cramming his face full of all of her baked goods and freaks out and starts chasing him around, sort of destroying her own store, but also Pinocchio is destroying everything by eating it as he's running. And you have people stopping to watch, including Volpe and Feline. Geppetto also comes by just in time for him to get the blame pinned on him. He gets arrested, but Pinocchio escapes for a little while anyway. And he's wandering sadly through the town at night, and he hears a cricket, which is this terrifying CGI monstrosity that flies at his face.
It's like, I don't kill bugs. Usually I like to get them out and let them go, but I would stomp that too.
Yeah, Pinocchio stomps it, which, I mean, I can't blame him because the thing basically attacked him. Like in the book, when he kills the cricket, it's malicious. Like he means to murder this cricket. But in this, he just stomps on a bug that attacked his face. So
Pepe gets mad at him. He's just like, "Do you stomp everyone you first meet?" And you're like, "Well, do you fly into their face and terrify them every single person you meet?"
That is a good point. Yeah, Pinocchio goes home, but the cricket is there too, but it's glowing now, so I guess he's a ghost.
The only logical conclusion.
Yeah. He says his name is Pepe, and he's there to, I guess, put him on the right track. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but he's basically doing the Jiminy Cricket thing, being his conscience.
Is he, though?
Yeah, sort of.
I think he's more there just to make quips.
Yeah, that in this movie, yes.
He's just there to say, "I prefer the beach. But the housing's so bad." You relate, kids?
Yeah, I think he's probably one of those characters that they wrote in for the adults and he just didn't need to be there.
Agreed. At least he sort of fit in. He has a point. He's not just they're not just oh crap, we're 20 minutes from the end. We need to toss in Pepe because reasons. And
yeah, no, he was integrated well. It's just a lot of the way his lines were written weren't.
Oh, they were ridiculous. And this is no slight on this movie, but if you look at the low budget ripoffs of all the different movies that have come out over the past, say, 20 years, there's a character that's quippy like this in every single one of those.
Yeah. Especially during this time period.
Oh, yeah.
He's kind of part of a long-running trope.
Oh, very much. Well, it's kind of like how Marvel movies now, they have that, you'll have a very intense situation and they'll pull out some kind of a quippy thing to kind of break the tension.
Yeah.
And it kind of kills the moment, which isn't so much the case here, but it still affects.
Yeah.
Every time Pepe showed his face on the screen, it killed my moment.
That's fair. I think that is 100% fair.
Yeah. Thankfully, he's not. I mean, he's throughout the movie, but he's not in it as much as you would expect. If you've seen the Disney version, because I think that's most people's frame of reference is the Disney version, and he's not in it as much as Jiminy was. I will say, though, that his first thing that he tells Pinocchio to do is really stupid, because somebody knocks on the door and he just tells him to answer it and smile, which is the exact opposite thing I would tell a child who is alone in the middle of the night to do. Don't tell a lone child to go answer a door of a stranger in the middle of the night.
Well, maybe Pinocchio is actually, or maybe Pepe is very anti-Pinocchio. And so all the advice he's giving him is the bad advice.
It seems like that in this scene anyway. But yeah, it's the police there to arrest him, and he and Geppetto are put on trial the next day. Geppetto ends up getting sentenced to 3 years in debtor's prison since he doesn't have, I think it was like 3,000 lira to pay the fine, and I'm not sure what that would translate to in dollars. Not that it matters because it's a different time period anyways, but it's apparently a ton of money. So enter Laurenzini, offering to pay off his debt if Pinocchio is given over to him. And Geppetto reluctantly agrees after Lorenzini tells him he can give him a better home than Geppetto can. But Pinocchio doesn't want to go. So Geppetto tries to do the I'm angry so you'll leave me for your own good thing. And he tells him he's not a real boy. So he sort of reluctantly agrees to leave with Lorenzini. And on his way out, he tells Geppetto that he loves him.
So one real quick thing on this particular section, maybe it was just me. To this point, it still kind of lived in a relatively realistic world. But when I saw the judge's box thing and how high up it went, that was the first time in this movie it felt very fantastical. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know that I gave it much of a thought because I was already thinking that it wasn't a real world anyways, because
True.
I'm now familiar with the book and I know that the world of Pinocchio is a ridiculous one. So that was one of the least ridiculous things that I've seen or read. Yeah, you would have thought it was even more ridiculous if it was a gorilla up there. So.
Oh, very true. Well, and that would be the other thing that would make it crazy. But just like everything to this point was pretty not grounded, but it was like the buildings all worked. Everything outside of a wooden boy, by and large, everything was normal.
Yeah.
And then you get that, and it's like, well, okay. And then we head off to the circus, the carnival, and things kind of start going crazy.
Yeah.
Slowly descend into madness.
Yes. I mean, I descended into madness like 20 minutes ago, but
You have a brief scene after this where Geppetto leaves the court and Leona calls down to him from her window to tell him that she's sorry about what happened. She's woven throughout the whole movie in little bits here and there. Like, she's not a main character, but she kind of is because she's throughout the entire movie in just little snippets. So Pinocchio goes on to be the star in Lorenzini's shows, and you have a scene where he's given some gold coins as payment, which it's sort of like everything with Lorenzini is similar to the book, but also very different because I don't know how to pronounce his name for sure. Mangiafuoco, he seems like a bad guy in the book, but he's also sort of nice. I don't know. Like, he's gonna burn Pinocchio alive in the book, but then he doesn't. He's a confusing character. He also gives Pinocchio some money in the book and lets him go. So he's not the same character as like Lorenzini or Stromboli in the Disney version. He's not like straight up evil in the book. So this is a similar scene in that he's giving him gold coins, which will be part of the story later, like in the book. But this plays out differently because Pinocchio learns through this. Like, he thinks that this means that Lorenzini loves him, but Pepe shows him, no, he doesn't love you. And this is where you get him breathing fire. Like, he uses this giant fish puppet thing as sort of, I don't know what it is. Like, he blows pepper breath into this thing and it shoots out as fire. So I don't know.
It's foreshadowing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Well, at this point, I didn't think that there was going to be, like, I'd forgotten about everything that happens towards the end, and I didn't know if there was going to actually be a terrible dogfish or great shark or monster of the whale or whatever. Depending on which version you're reading or watching, it can be one of several things. So I figured, well, maybe that's this version's version, is having Lorenzini use this thing, and that's the whale or the dogfish or the shark. So I didn't know where they were going with this, and yeah.
Oh, you poor soul. I remembered. We'll talk about it later, but I remembered.
Yeah. I also thought that at this point, like I said, I forgot how this ends. So I was like, why does this guy want to burn expensive puppets in every show? Like, he's talking about this like this is going to be his new thing. Like, why are you just going to torch all these expensive puppets? You find out later that money is no object to this guy, but yeah, it seemed like a very dumb idea to just set everything on fire as a closer. But yeah, Pinocchio, he's he's basically reminded that Geppetto made some of these puppets, so they're basically his brothers and sisters, and he needs to save them. So he starts yanking their strings, which knocks a puppeteer out of the rafters, hitting the fish, redirecting the fire onto the curtain, and burning down the entire theater. Which, like, Laurenzini should have seen that coming. Like, don't use live fire in a place where you've got fabric hanging everywhere.
Well, you live, you learn.
Yes. Pinocchio saves his siblings and escapes, but Lorenzini tells Volpe and okay, my autocorrect. Felinae was autocorrected to fennel. Volpe and Felinae, not fennel. Yeah, so Lorenzini tells Volpe and Felinae to bring Pinocchio back to him or he'll kill them both. At this point, if I were working for him, I would be like, bye, and never come back.
Well, if you can go out there and, if you can get clear of them and still keep your job, you can still collect wages and run away. Maybe they still provide health insurance at that point.
Yeah, well, Felinae may be slightly smarter than Volpe, but they're both not really the brightest bulbs in the bunch.
No, definitely not.
Pinocchio eventually leaps into a river and floats downstream and winds up in a forest. There's kind of a musical number in this scene. The movie is sort of a musical, but not really. Like, it's kind of a weird almost musical, but not really. Meanwhile, Geppetto is searching everywhere for Pinocchio with the help of Leona, and she says that she's been all over town and even went to ask the witch who hasn't spoken in years if she'd seen him. What did she say?
What did she say?
Nothing.
That was a good joke.
It was.
And he gets a stick.
Yeah, the witch gave her a stick, which apparently means Pinocchio went to the forest. Like, okay. I guess she's a witch. She must know things.
Couldn't she just have written it down? She could have been like, hey, I think he's going to go to the forest.
That's not the witchy way.
That's fair. I mean, considering the judge's bench is like 20,000 feet high, that makes sense.
Eventually, Felinae and Volpe find Pinocchio after he gets chased out of the woods by a woodpecker. He had wandered into a church, and they followed the sound of him dropping a golden coin into the offering plate, which they promptly stole.
Yeah, they did.
Yep.
And you get a scene here where Pinocchio learns what forgiveness is, and this could have been a very poignant scene where he prays for forgiveness for being a puppet instead of a real boy for his father. But then Volpe starts sobbing about missing his father too and ruins what could have been a moment. And she tells him that she knows of a way he can become a real boy if he buys a miracle. But miracles are expensive and he doesn't have enough money. But they know where he can get more. If he plants his gold in the field of miracles and waits, it'll grow into, I guess, a coin plant. This is from the book, but in different context. Like, in the book, he wants more money that he can give to his father, and they trick him into going to the field of miracles and planting his coins. This is a different context, the way they're doing it, but this is actually from the book.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
Yes. So that's what they do. They go plant the coins, and then Pepe comes by and tells him that he's been tricked because miracles don't grow on trees. But he doesn't want to listen, and he waits it out, and he goes back to the field and sees that they dug up his coins while he was gone. I don't know why, but him yelling at himself, "Stupid me," really cracked me up.
I think in that time a dog came and peed on him as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was a dumb joke. I was like, why is that supposed to be funny? I suppose maybe a little kid would find that funny, but I didn't.
It's comedy, Jonathan.
Yes. Comedy is subjective.
Yeah, true.
You don't understand.
I didn't understand the artistic vision that they had for having
It
this
was
dog
very
pee on his foot.
highbrow.
Somewhere in here, you also have a near miss with Geppetto going through the town looking for him. They like just miss each other. And after all this, a stagecoach comes by carrying Lampwick, who was a character like you saw Lampwick a couple times earlier in the movie. Like he gets into a fight with him at school, so Pinocchio recognizes him and he calls him to join them. They're going to Terra Magica, which is in the Disney version. This was Pleasure Island. In the book, I believe it was called the Isle of Toys.
Really?
Because I've always just assumed that Pleasure Island was the name, but that was from Disney.
If it's the Isle of Toys, is there a Charlie in the Box there?
Is there a what?
A Charlie in the Box.
That's the Isle of Misfit Toys.
That's true.
On the wiki page, it says Toyland, and there are differences in different versions, like depending on who translated it. So I think the version that I was listening to called it the Island of Toys. So on the wiki page, it says Toyland. Like there are various differences. Like the blue fairy can be either the fairy with blue hair or the fairy with azure hair. And there's just little translation differences in different versions. So like even what became Monstro in the Disney version is either the terrible dogfish or the great shark, depending on who's been translating it. So in this version, they took the idea and made it Terra Magica, because I guess that just sounds more magical.
I mean, it has the word magic in it, so yeah.
Yeah, sort of. It's not even an island, though. They just go through a waterfall and it's on the other side. Like all of this horror is happening very near to the town that the kids are being taken from.
I think I'm just gonna say if I was trying to sell something to little boys, I feel like Terra Magica sounds a bit more like a place like Tinkerbell would hang out than like where I would be like, yeah, that makes me want to go smash chalkboards.
I guess I could see that. Like they could have called it the Island of Destruction.
Come smash stuff.
There we go.
Mallet point.
I mean, for some kids, that's all you'd have to say. They'll be like, I'll give you an infinite supply of everything you could ever want to purposely break and never get in trouble. I mean, when I was a kid, I probably could have been tricked into doing something like that because we liked breaking things that we thought were garbage.
Gorilla Judge, you don't understand. I thought it was garbage.
Yeah, so he leaves on the stagecoach. He also loses his hat, which Geppetto and Leona eventually find on the beach. They see him get on the stagecoach and they try to follow but lose him. But when they find his hat on the beach, Geppetto thinks he went out to sea, which he didn't lose sight of him that long ago, so he would still be visible. This seems like Geppetto was not thinking things through very well, but I think we've already established he's a little off.
He's obviously riding one of those floatable stagecoaches.
Yeah. He decides to just take a boat that's on the beach. He apparently steals somebody's boat and rows out to sea. And this is where you find out their backstory, because he and Leona are yelling back and forth, and you find out that the reason that he was in love with her and they never did anything about that was that the day that he carved the heart into the Pinocchio tree, she accepted his brother's proposal. So she was taken that day, and that was the end of that. But if the brothers died, you'd think he would have done something about that after the brother died, but oh well.
Somebody knows, but it's not us.
Yeah. So back to Terra Magica. It turns out that Laurenzini owns this park, which is new to this version because Mangiafuoco had nothing to do with the scene with any of the donkeys. So this is why this Laurenzini character is kind of an amalgamation of characters from the book. So he owns the park, and apparently in this version, Like they've changed the idea that it's just bad little boys turn into donkeys. In this version, they need to drink cursed water in order to change into donkeys, which the water does the same thing. Like you don't find out right away. Like I assumed it was just donkey water. Like in my notes, I kept calling it donkey water. But until you find out later that it brings out your true nature. So that's why the little boys turn into donkeys. But yeah, I'm going to have to stop myself from calling it donkey water because that's what I wrote through my notes until I figured out what was going on. But I just thought donkey water sounded funny.
Well, I mean, in theory, it is donkey water until we're proven otherwise a little bit later on. So you're okay for now.
Yeah. But yeah, this is why Laurenzini felt like he could just burn puppets willy-nilly because he has an infinite supply of donkey children that he can sell into slavery and also skin for a new pair of boots, which is extremely dark because he when they turn the first batch into donkeys, he tells one of his minions to skin one for a new pair of boots, which is kind of horrifying. It was literally a child a minute ago, and you're skinning it for boots.
Well, what else would you do with it? Yeah, it sounds like he's got an abundance of donkeys, really. I mean, how many donkeys does any one person need?
I mean, he seems to think in that same direction, so yeah. But yeah, like I said, it's the water that turns them into donkeys, which in this version turns out to be a key detail because earlier, while they were misbehaving, Pinocchio got shot full of holes when they were playing with a gun. So with him, the water, like they go through a roller coaster and get showered and drink the water. So the water all kind of leaks out of him and he only gets partially turned into a donkey. So he's fine while all the kids around him are fully donkeyfied.
And it's creepy as hell when they go through the transformation.
Yeah.
How did you not remember this, Jonathan?
I don't know. Maybe it was too traumatic and I blocked it out.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I think it's just one of those things that different kids are affected differently because with the original Disney Pinocchio, I don't remember the donkey scene terrifying me at all. And then watching it as an adult, I was like, this is really disturbing. Why was I not affected as a child? Like, I remembered watching it. Like, I remembered everything, but it hit different as an adult than it did as a kid. I think it was the fact that it was more, like, you understood more of what was going on. Like, if you start thinking about it, everything that's happening in both this one and the Disney version, it's literally human trafficking in a very horrifying way. Like, it's played kind of for laughs, and in this version, there's no lasting effects. And I mean,
Thank
I
God
guess
for that.
I mean, this is now as good a time as any to talk about the book because in the book there's no coming back from being a donkey. The only one who gets turned back is Pinocchio because Pinocchio is bought by someone who wants his skin and they feel sorry for him and don't want him to suffer. So they tie a rope around him and decide to toss him into the ocean to drown instead of killing him in a normal way.
Wow, that's really nice.
That's not even the end of it. He doesn't drown. He's eaten alive by fish. And instead of a skeleton, he still had his wooden body. So the fish eat the donkey off of him, and he's left behind.
Oh my God.
The book is dark. The book is messed up.
I'm just thinking logistically, like, wow. Okay.
Yeah. No, the book is messed up.
So he's literally like a puppet in donkey's clothing.
Yes, exactly.
What kind of sawdust was this person smoking?
Not the good stuff.
The whole book is just a series of not even unfortunate events, a series of horrible events that happen to Pinocchio because the point of the book Pinocchio is to tell children not to misbehave. Because Pinocchio is a terrible little kid and he gets comeuppance for every terrible thing that he does in horrifying ways. Like he's literally hung. Like the original ending for the book was him getting hung and dying until the publisher told him that he needed to write some more and give it a better ending.
And when was Pinocchio written?
In the 1800s.
That explains it.
Yeah, no, the book is dark. And it's also matter of fact. Like at least in the version that I was listening to, it was just the guy was just like a normal talking, just matter of factly telling all these things that were happening. It's like if you think about what's going on, there should be like horror movie music playing. The guy should be talking in a sinister voice. There's so much messed up stuff that happens in the book Pinocchio that it's a wonder that Disney ever thought it was suitable for making into a movie. The Disney version was very sanitized, like more than most of their other stuff. I mean, Bambi was also extraordinarily dark, but Disney really cleaned up the stuff from the book.
I mean, if you look at the old Hans Christian Andersen movie
Yes.
or stories, those are pretty dark. But how do they rate compared to this?
It's been so long since I read any of that. And really, I think Grimm's would be even darker than Hans Christian Andersen. But I think that the book Pinocchio was written in that kind of style where just you're bad, so bad things are going to happen to you.
Wow, so no redemption.
I mean, at the end, Pinocchio does turn into a real boy in the book, but after a ton of horrible things happen to him. And also since we're on the donkey scene, the donkeys in this version, you later find out that they turned back after they performed enough good deeds. But in the book, none of them turned back. And in fact, he finds Lampwick again much later and watches him die.
Wow.
Yeah, it's dark.
I mean, I was going to say, like, I'm trying to think if it was the next, like, in the New Adventures, someone, and I think it was the little apparition that he sees, without giving too much away, tells him, you've had to do a lot of good to make up for all that bad. And that, I'm sure, relates back to this, but still, wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all the kids are turned into donkeys, except Pinocchio basically just grows ears, which get broken off right away by Laurenzini. And he gets Lampwick to kick him into the water, and he starts transforming into something that we can't see, but one of the kids screams that he's turning into a monster, and he jumps out of the pool and runs away. Like he dives into the ocean. So everyone escapes, and Pinocchio finds Leona at the beach, and she tells him where Geppetto went. And then he leaves just as abruptly as Geppetto did. Leona yells after him, but he doesn't stop. And then out at sea, he sees a massive creature below him and maybe a sunken boat. And then he gets eaten. And Pepe is there. He remarks that it smells like rotten chili peppers inside this monster, which means obviously that this is Laurenzini, which is another twist just for this version. Laurenzini is basically all of the original villains mixed into one, plus the fish. Like he turned into the monster, which I kind of like. Like I like that they were like, if they're going to go your own direction with a character like this, I like that they were able to mash them all up like this in a way that feels natural. It's bizarre, but I appreciate the creativity.
Yeah, it was definitely solid.
Pinocchio finds Geppetto in his side, the stomach, and they try to find a way out, back up Lorenzini's throat. Geppetto can't fit, so Pinocchio, this I remembered, the Pinocchio lying to extend his nose and stretch out the throat. I don't know why I didn't remember anything that came before that, but Pinocchio telling his father that he hated him and his nose growing, that I remembered. So Lorenzini starts choking and he coughs them out. And the last thing we see of him is him disappearing into the depths of the sea, coughing and choking. And I was thinking, this is one of those rare versions that there actually is. I mean, not to spoil the next movie. If the next movie didn't exist, you get some comeuppance for the villain. Because it seems like he has been done for. Like, he should have died, honestly, by this giant spike in his throat choking him, like eventually that's going to kill somebody. So he gets some comeuppance for the human trafficking, which you don't always get, and you don't usually get in versions of Pinocchio. Usually the criminals just kind of get away with things. So they wash up on the beach where Leona is taking care of a donkey, which I don't know if it was one of the donkey children or not.
I think it might have been Lamplight.
That's kind of what I thought, but also they did have a wagon earlier, so maybe it was theirs. I don't know. She gives it some hay and tells it not to judge her cooking. Pinocchio and Geppetto, they apologize to each other and they hug, and Pinocchio starts crying magical tears which fall on his carved heart, and they turn him into Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Well, they first turn him into a beautiful mixture of the puppet, and then yeah.
Yes.
So I had to double check when this came out because I was thinking that Jonathan Taylor Thomas was younger than what he was supposed to be, but it's like he was apparently 15 or 16 in this, like by normal age.
I wonder if this is a case where they might have shot it a few years earlier. Maybe
They
it
might
got
have.
delayed because he did not seem 15 or 16.
No, even in voice,
Yeah,
it would not have
no.
unless they pitch shifted it, but he didn't sound what you would think a 15 or 16 would sound like.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So he's human now. They all go home together, but on the way, Pinocchio makes them stop the wagon, and he runs off to tell Feline and Volpe about Terra Magica and the magical water. But he tells them that if they drink the water while holding a rock, the rock will turn to gold. And for some reason, they believe this. Like I said, she might be smarter than him, but they're both not that smart. And you later find out that they've been transformed into a real cat and fox, which they can still talk as a cat and a fox, but the donkeys couldn't talk. There's not exactly any logic to this magic.
Maybe it's adult versus child.
I don't know, but the monster version of Laurenzini couldn't talk that we know of, so
True.
yeah, I don't know. Anyways, they get home and Pinocchio asks Geppetto to carve him a girlfriend, which is another thing that I remembered. I don't know, thinking on it now, it seems like a weird 90s thing to do. I don't know why. I don't feel like that would be something that would fit in today's humor. It just seems like something that's very 90s. I don't know why I think it's 90s.
Oh, it totally
do
is.
that,
That's
Yeah.
it's
it
a
just
very
felt
cheeky
90s.
Yeah, it shows that despite everything, Pinocchio is still very cheeky in his approach. And there's kind of like lines like that throughout, really.
Yeah, and it almost seems like the Pinocchio, I mean, it's not supposed to, but when he turns into Jonathan Taylor Thomas, he seems like a different character. Like he seems more, like you say, cheeky as the human version than he did when he was wooden.
Very much.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, he got a brain, so
True. No longer sawdust.
Sure, we'll go with that.
it is funny because when he's in his puppet form, they like say that his head is hollow, and it's like, well, good thing Geppetto like stopped right before like he hit like the hollow area, and like Pinocchio doesn't have like gaping
That's
holes.
true. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's basically the end, except you have some narration by Pepe telling us that Geppetto and Leona lived happily ever after, although to me they did not look like she looked uncomfortable.
Well, her husband's brother. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, if slight spoilers for the second one, but she's not around anymore.
Yep.
So maybe Pepe,
So
was
Pepe
lying to
lied.
us.
They did not live happily ever after.
Define happily ever after,
I mean, maybe her happily ever after was not hanging out with Geppetto.
There you go. I like it.
That sure, I'm gonna go with that. That's better than all the things you could insinuate from the fact that you get to the next one and she's not around. And I was like, so what? Did she live for like a few more months and then die? You also have Pepe telling us about the donkeys transforming back into boys by doing their many good deeds. And like I said, that is extremely not what happened in the book.
Oh, the 90s was about happy endings. Like, regardless, you had to have a happy ending.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the end for now. And we'll be back next time to talk about what happened after this, apparently.
Did you ever want to know what happened to Pinocchio after the one thing that made him interesting left?
It's like every sequel, or like 80% of sequels made today.
Yeah.
Kind of, yes. This is where that started. No, I'm sure it started earlier than this.
Dag nabbit, Jonathan, we talked about this. You can't be wandering things like that because one of those studio execs is going to pick up on it and things are going to happen.
I think they've been happening for a while.
Yeah, they have. You're right.
Okay, well, until the next episode, do you guys want to let people know where they can find you if they want more from you? Katie?
You can find me at Katie Draws Things on Twitter and Instagram. I draw things, and yes.
And Nicki?
You can find me here on YouTube at Trivial Theater. I do a wide variety of random, obscure, and straight up bad movies. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Trivial Theater.
Okay, well, until next time.
Remember, miracles are made in the heart.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Every Version Ever. If you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform or to our YouTube channel. Make sure to follow my co-hosts as well, and if you want more content from us, check out one of the other podcasts in the I Heart Movies podcast network, or check out my brand new Patreon. My link tree, as well as any other relevant links, will be in the description. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.